My name's Pamela, and up until recently, I was just your average workaholic advertising specialist. I lived and breathed my job at this fancy agency in the heart of the city. You know the type, big glass building, top floor office with a view that'd make your head spin. I was good at what I did, damn good actually. The agency relied on me for pretty much everything. I was your typical career-focused woman in her early 30s. No husband, no kids, just me and my work. My tiny apartment was more like a pit stop between office hours than an actual home. I'd roll in late at night, crash for a few hours, then head right back out. Rinse and repeat. My boss, well, she was something else. Picture a 60-something woman with more ambition than empathy. She owned the agency, and boy, did she let everyone know it. Her name was Vivian, but we all called her Mrs. Crawford behind her back. To her face? It was all yes, ma'am, and right away, ma'am. One particular Monday morning, I dragged myself into the office, feeling like death warmed over. I'd caught some nasty bug over the weekend, but deadlines wait for no one, especially not in Vivian's world. I was hunched over my computer, trying to focus on the quarterly report through my fever haze, when Vivian's voice cut through the office like a knife. Pamela, my office, now. I stumbled to her door, knowing full well what was coming. The report was late, and Vivian Crawford did not do late. What the hell is this? She snarled, waving a printout in my face. You call this a report? Any 5-year-old could put together something more coherent than this garbage. I'm sorry, Ms. Crawford, I mumbled, my head pounding. I've been sick, Anne. Sick? She scoffed. You think clients care if you're sick? You think I built this agency by taking sick days? You're useless, Pamela. Utterly useless. Her words hit me like a slap. I'd poured my heart and soul into this job for years, sacrificed everything for it. And this was what I got in return? I don't know if it was the fever or just years of pent-up frustration, but something in me snapped. Tears welled up in my eyes, and before I knew it, I was bolting out of her office, past the shocked faces of my coworkers, and into the elevator. The elevator dinged, and as the doors slid open, I came face to face with a pair of concerned brown eyes. Hey, are you okay? A deep voice asked. I looked up, startled by the voice. Standing there was a man about my age, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. I must have looked a sight, because his brow furrowed even deeper when he saw my face. I'm fine, I stammered, trying to regain my composure. But the tears betrayed me, streaming down my cheeks. You don't look fine, he said gently. Look, I know it's none of my business, but, would you like to grab a coffee? Sometimes talking to a stranger can help. I hesitated. I never did things like this, running out of work, crying in elevators, accepting invitations from strangers. But something about his genuine concern broke through my defenses. Actually, I sniffled, that sounds nice. We made our way to a little cafe, just down the street. As we sat down with our coffees, he introduced himself as Jake. So, he said, settling into his chair, want to tell me what's got you so upset? I found myself pouring out the whole story, how I'd been feeling ill, how I was behind on my work, and how my boss had torn into me. I was careful not to mention any names or specifics about the company, but I didn't hold back on describing how devastated I felt. Wow, Jake said when I finished. That's rough. No one deserves to be treated like that, especially when they're sick. We ended up talking for over an hour. Jake told me about his own job in finance, his hobbies, his dog. It was easy, comfortable conversation, and I found myself laughing, despite the awful morning I'd had. As we were getting ready to leave, Jake hesitated. Listen, Pamela. I know we just met, but I'd really like to see you again. Maybe we could grab dinner sometime? I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. We exchanged numbers, and as I watched him walk away, I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I started seeing each other regularly. We'd meet for dinner after work, or spend weekends exploring the city. With each date, I found myself falling harder for him. He was kind, funny, and supportive, everything I'd been missing in my life. At work, things were, well, they were what they always were. Vivian was still Vivian, demanding and critical. But somehow, it didn't bother me as much anymore. Knowing I had Jake to talk to at the end of the day made it all more bearable. One night, about a year after we'd met, Jake took me to a fancy restaurant. As we finished our dessert, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. "Pamela, will you marry me?" Happy tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded enthusiastically. Yes, of course I'll marry you." As Jake slipped the ring on my finger, I felt like I was floating on air. Everything was perfect. Jake was perfect. Our life together would be perfect. The weeks following our engagement were a whirlwind of happiness. One evening, as we cuddled on the couch in my apartment, Jake brought up something I hadn't even considered. "Babe," he said, running his fingers through my hair, "I think it's time you met my mom. She's been asking to meet you. How about this weekend? We can drive out to her place." That Saturday, we pulled up to a house that made my jaw drop. It was huge, easily 3 times the size of the house I grew up in. The door swung open, and I froze. Standing there, looking just as shocked as I felt, was Vivian Crawford, my boss, Jake's mother. "Mom," Jake said warmly, oblivious to the tension, "this is Pamela, my fiancée." Vivian's eyes narrowed as they swept over me. "Pamela," she said, her voice cold. "What a surprise." "Jake, darling, surely you can do better than this." She waved her hand dismissively in my direction. "With your money, your position, you could have any woman you want. Why settle for someone from such a modest background?" I felt like I'd been slapped. Jake's arm tightened around me. "Mom," he said, his voice hard, "I love Pamela. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm marrying her, with or without your approval." Vivian's face darkened, but Jake didn't give her a chance to respond. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "I'm so sorry about this, Pam. Let's go." As we drove away, I finally found my voice. "Jake," I said shakily, "there's something I need to tell you." I spilled everything, how Vivian was my boss, how she'd treated me at work, the incident that led to me meeting Jake in the first place. Jake listened silently, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I finished, he pulled the car over and turned to face me. "Pamela," he said firmly, "I want you to know that this changes nothing. I love you, and I'm on your side, no matter what." His words were like a lifeline, and I clung to them desperately. We decided to move forward with our wedding plans, despite Vivian's disapproval. Jake and I found a small apartment together, and for a while, everything seemed okay. But at work, things were getting worse. Vivian's treatment of me had always been harsh, but now it was downright cruel. She'd humiliate me in meetings, mock my ideas in front of clients, and pile on impossible deadlines. Yet she never fired me. I was too valuable to the agency, and we both knew it. I'd come home every night exhausted and demoralized. Jake was always there, supportive and loving, but I could see the toll it was taking on him too. He'd confront his mother, begging her to treat me better, but it only seemed to make things worse. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I'd been working on a massive presentation for weeks, pouring every ounce of creativity and effort I had into it. As I stood in front of the management team, including Vivian, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this time I'd finally earn her approval. I was halfway through my pitch when Vivian's cold voice cut through the room. "Is this a joke, Pamela? This is what you've been working on for weeks? This is amateur work at best. I've seen interns produce better concepts than this drivel." The room fell silent. I could feel the pitying looks from my colleagues, but no one dared to speak up against Vivian. "I can revise it," I stammered, fighting back tears. Vivian waved her hand dismissively. "Don't bother. We'll have someone competent handle it from here. You're dismissed." I fled the conference room, my cheeks burning with humiliation. As soon as I reached my desk, I broke down in tears. It was too much. The constant criticism, the public humiliation, the stress of navigating this impossible situation with my mother-in-law. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, I stumbled into our apartment, still sniffling. Jake took one look at me and pulled me into a tight hug. "That's it," he said firmly. "You can't keep doing this to yourself, Pam. You need to quit. Your mental health is more important than any job." The next day, I marched into Vivian's office and handed in my resignation. Her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little thing," she sputtered. "After everything this agency has done for you? You're just going to abandon us?" I stood my ground, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm sorry, but I can't continue working in this environment. My last day will be in 2 weeks." As I turned to leave, Vivian's voice stopped me cold. "You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. You'll regret this, Pamela. Mark my words." I threw myself into job hunting, confident that my skills and experience would land me a new position quickly. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to worry. Every promising lead seemed to fizzle out at the last minute. It was as if someone was sabotaging my efforts. Finally, after nearly 6 months of searching, I landed a job at a smaller agency. It wasn't as prestigious as my old position, but I was grateful for the opportunity. As I settled into my new role, I began to feel like things were finally looking up. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Just as I was starting to feel secure in my new job, my boss called me into his office. The moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. "Pamela," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "I'm afraid we have to let you go. Your work has been excellent. It's just, well, I can't say more, but my hands are tied. I'm sorry." As I packed up my desk in a daze, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Vivian. "How does unemployment feel, dear? Perhaps now you'll learn your place." In that moment, I realized the true extent of my mother-in-law's vindictiveness. She hadn't just threatened to ruin my career, she was actually doing it. The following months were a blur of anxiety and frustration. No matter how many resumes I sent out or interviews I went to, I couldn't seem to land a job. I started picking up freelance gigs just to make ends meet, but it was barely enough to cover our bills. One afternoon, as I sat at our kitchen table, scrolling through job listings I knew would lead nowhere, my phone rang. It was Vivian. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Pamela, dear," Vivian's saccharine voice oozed through the speaker. "I just thought I'd check in on my favorite daughter-in-law. You know, Jake's birthday is coming up soon." I froze. In all the chaos of the past few months, I'd completely forgotten about Jake's birthday. "I was thinking," Vivian continued, her voice suddenly warm, "why don't we surprise him? We could throw a party at my house. All his friends, family, it would be lovely, don't you think? It's time we put our differences aside, don't you think? Jake'd be so happy to see us getting along." As much as I wanted to refuse, I couldn't deny that Jake would love to see his mother and wife reconcile. And after everything he'd done for me, didn't he deserve a special birthday? "All right," I said hesitantly. "What did you have in mind?" Vivian's voice brightened. "Wonderful. Why don't you come over early on the day of the party? We can set everything up together. It'll be our little secret from Jake." Against my better judgment, I agreed. The day of the party arrived, and I made my way to Vivian's house, my stomach in knots. As I approached the front door, I could hear voices and laughter inside. As I stepped inside, I was shocked to see the house already full of guests. Vivian's phone was in her hand, apparently live streaming the event. "Everyone," Vivian announced loudly, her eyes gleaming with malice, "I'd like you all to greet our help for the evening." Before I could process what was happening, Vivian thrust a maid's uniform into my hands. "Here you go, dear. The kitchen's that way. Chop chop, these guests won't serve themselves." I stood there, stunned, as the room fell silent. All eyes were on me, a mix of pity and secondhand embarrassment on their faces. "What's the matter?" Vivian sneered, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "This is what you're suited for, isn't it? A girl from the slums, parents who worked in a factory. You should be grateful I'm giving you the opportunity to serve your betters." The humiliation was overwhelming. Tears pricked at my eyes as I looked around the room, desperately searching for a friendly face, for someone to stand up to this cruelty. But everyone averted their gaze, unwilling to challenge Vivian. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I'd endured months of Vivian's torment, but this was a step too far. Without a word, I dropped the uniform at Vivian's feet and stormed out of the house, ignoring her calls behind me. I burst into our apartment, a mess of tears and anger. Jake was there, getting ready to head to his mother's house. He took one look at me, and his face fell. When I told him everything, Jake's face paled. He grabbed his phone and quickly pulled up his mother's social media page. There it was, the video of my humiliation, already gaining views and nasty comments. Jake's hands shook as he watched the video. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the love for his mother warring with his love for me. But as Vivian's cruel words rang out from the phone speakers, his jaw set in determination. He dialed Vivian's number, putting the phone on speaker. When she answered, her voice was sickly sweet. "Jake, darling, where are you? Everyone's waiting." "Save it, Mom," Jake cut her off. "I saw the video. How could you do that to Pamela?" There was a pause, then Vivian's voice turned cold. "Oh please, Jake. I was just putting her in her place. You know she's not good enough for you. I was doing you a favor." "No, Mom," Jake interrupted again. "You weren't doing me any favors. You were being cruel and manipulative. I love Pamela, and I won't let you treat her like this anymore. We're done. Don't contact us again." He hung up before Vivian could respond. The silence in our apartment was deafening. Jake turned to me, his eyes soft. "I'm so sorry, Pam. I had no idea she would go this far." I fell into his arms, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. We spent the rest of the evening together, ignoring the constant ringing of Jake's phone. It was only the next morning that we realized the full extent of Vivian's retaliation. Jake's boss called him in for an emergency meeting. When he returned home a few hours later, his face was ashen. "They fired me," he said, his voice hollow. "Apparently, the CEO is a close friend of my mother's. She asked him to let me go." We spent the next few days trying to figure out our next move. With both of us unemployed and Vivian's influence seemingly everywhere, our options felt limited. "Maybe," Jake said hesitantly one evening, "maybe we should consider moving. Start fresh somewhere else, away from my mother's influence." The idea was tempting, but something nagged at me. "Jake," I said slowly, "why did your parents get divorced? You've never really talked about it." Jake's face clouded over. "I don't really know the details. Mom always said Dad abandoned us, that he didn't want anything to do with me. Dad tried to contact me a few times when I was younger, but Mom always intercepted the calls, told me he was just trying to manipulate us." An idea started to form in my mind. "Jake, what if we reached out to your dad? Maybe he could shed some light on all of this." We arranged to meet Jake's father, Robert, at a quiet cafe the next day. As we walked in, I spotted an older man who bore a striking resemblance to Jake. His face lit up when he saw us, and he stood to greet us with a warm, if slightly awkward, hug for Jake. "You must be Pamela," he said, turning to me with a kind smile. "It's wonderful to meet you." As we settled in with our coffees, Robert's face grew serious. "Jake, I can't tell you how happy I am to hear from you. But I have a feeling this isn't just a social call. What's going on?" Jake took a deep breath and began to explain everything: Vivian's treatment of me, her sabotage of our careers, the humiliating party incident. Robert listened intently, his face growing darker with each revelation. Dad, Jake said hesitantly, what really happened between you and Mom? Why did you divorce? Robert's eyes clouded over with a mix of anger and sadness. It's a long story, son. One I'm not proud of. You see, I used to work for my father's company. Your mother was in the accounting department. I thought we were happy, but... He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. One day, the police showed up at the office. Your grandfather was arrested for tax evasion. It all happened so fast, the company was in chaos, and suddenly your mother was taking charge, saying she'd keep things running. Jake and I exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. This sounded awfully familiar. Robert continued. I had my suspicions. Your mother had access to all the financial records, and she'd been pushing for more control in the company for months. I confronted her, asked her if she had anything to do with framing your grandfather. She didn't deny it, Robert continued. Instead, she threatened me. I had an affair. It was brief, but your mother found out. She had evidence, photos, messages, everything. Jake and I exchanged a shocked glance as Robert continued, his voice heavy with regret. The woman I had the affair with, her husband was an incredibly influential man in our industry. Your mother threatened to tell him everything unless I did exactly as she said. She gave me an ultimatum, divorce her, give her everything, and stay away from you, or she'd destroy me completely. I'm ashamed to say I took the coward's way out. I thought I was protecting you, Jake. As we sat there, processing everything we'd learned, a memory suddenly hit me. Jake, I said urgently, remember when I first started at the agency? I noticed some discrepancies in the books. I even took some pictures, thinking I might need to bring it up to Vivian later. Jake's eyes widened. Pam, are you saying? I nodded. I think your mother might be doing the same thing she did to your grandfather. If we can prove it. After our revealing conversation with Robert at the cafe, we all decided to return to our apartment. As soon as we entered, I made a beeline for my laptop. Jake and Robert watched intently as I booted it up, their anticipation palpable. Here they are, I said, pulling up the folder containing the incriminating photos. Just as I remembered. Jake and Robert leaned in, their eyes widening as they took in the images on the screen. Clear as day, there was evidence of double-entry bookkeeping, one set of books for the tax authorities, and another showing the true state of the company's finances. Jake's face set in determination. We need to take this to the authorities right away. Mom can't keep getting away with this. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We contacted the tax authorities, presenting them with the evidence I had uncovered. They launched a full and in-depth audit of Vivian's agency. The investigation was thorough and relentless. The scale of tax evasion was staggering. Vivian was arrested and charged with multiple counts of tax evasion and fraud. The trial was swift, and the evidence overwhelming. In the end, the judge handed down a harsh sentence. Vivian would be spending several years in prison. In the aftermath of Vivian's conviction, the court decided to transfer ownership of the agency to Jake, as the closest family member not implicated in the crimes. It was a lot to take in, and we spent many late nights discussing what to do next. One evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset, Jake turned to me with a smile. You know, Pam, I've been thinking. This agency needs a fresh start, a new direction. And I can't think of anyone better to lead it than you. I stared at him in shock. Me? But Jake, He cut me off gently. You're brilliant, Pam. You saw what was happening when no one else did. You have the skills, the vision, and the integrity to turn this agency into something we can be proud of. What do you say? Will you be our new executive director? Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. After everything we'd been through, after all the times Vivian had tried to tear me down, here I was, being offered the chance to lead the very agency she had used to torment me. The next few months were busy as we restructured the agency. We implemented strict ethical guidelines, rebuilt client relationships, and created a work environment based on respect and creativity. Slowly but surely, the agency's reputation began to recover. Through it all, Robert was there, offering support and advice. Over time, the awkwardness faded, and we found ourselves enjoying Sunday dinners together, rebuilding the family bonds that Vivian had tried so hard to destroy.
I'm Jack, 28, living in a cramped Detroit apartment. Life was finally looking up. I just landed my dream job at a top-tier tech company. I was on cloud 9, thinking everything was falling into place. Then, out of the blue, I get this call that turns my world upside down. Jack, it's about your parents. My aunt's voice trembles on the other end. They're both really sick. It's bad. Everything stops. I rush to their house, and it's a nightmare. Mom can barely lift a glass of water, and Dad's struggling just to make it to the bathroom. As I stand there, it hits me. I have to step up. But what about my job? My future? I call my brother, Henry, thinking surely he'll step in. Hey, Henry, it's Jack. Have you heard about Mom and Dad? Yeah, tough break, he says, sounding distracted. I've got a meeting in 5. Can we talk later? Henry, they need round-the-clock care. I'm thinking of taking a leave from work. Whoa, slow down there, hero, he cuts in. I've got my own family to deal with. I'm swamped here in LA. I'm floored. So, that's it? You're not going to help at all? Look, I'm sure you've got it covered. Gotta run. And just like that, he's gone, leaving me staring at my phone, feeling sucker punched. As I settle into this new role as a caregiver, memories of growing up hit me hard. Mom and Dad worked their fingers to the bone just to keep us afloat. Dad pulled double shifts to buy us school supplies, while Mom patched up old clothes to make them last another year. Henry was always Henry. I remember one Christmas when I was about 10. Our parents had managed to get us each one decent gift. I got a science kit I'd been dreaming of, and Henry got the latest video game console. You'd think he'd be thrilled, but no. This isn't even the pro version, he whined. Jimmy's parents got him the pro. I can still see the hurt in Mom's eyes. Dad just sighed and said, "Maybe next year, son." Now, as I watch my parents struggle with even the simplest tasks, those memories sting even more. I'm putting my entire life on hold, while Henry's living it up in LA. Jack, sweetie, Mom calls weekly from her bedroom. Can you help me with my pills? Coming, Mom. I holler back, shoving thoughts of Henry aside. I have more important things to focus on. My parents need me, and I'll be damned if I let them down like Henry has. As I help Mom with her medication, I wonder, how did I end up as the sole caregiver while Henry gets to live his best life? But then I see Mom's grateful smile, and I know I'm doing the right thing. It's going to be tough, but I'm in this for the long haul. Henry may have forgotten what family means, but I sure as hell haven't. 2 years in, my life's become a never-ending loop of doctor visits and pill organizers. I'm working part-time at Joe's corner store just to keep the lights on. My savings? Gone. That promising career? Feels like a distant dream now. Jack, your shift starts in 20. Joe calls out as I rush in, still in yesterday's wrinkled clothes. Sorry, Joe. Dad had a rough night. I'll be ready in 5. I'm stocking shelves when my phone buzzes. Another reminder to call Henry. I've lost count of how many times I've reached out, begging for help. Henry, it's Jack. Look, I know you're busy, but... Jack, now's not a good time, he interrupts. We're renovating the kitchen. You wouldn't believe how much custom cabinetry costs these days. I bite my tongue. Mom and Dad have been asking about you. Maybe you could visit, or at least give them a quick call. Sorry, bro. Big deal coming up at work. I gotta focus. Maybe next month. Click. It's always next month, always an excuse. Later that night, as I'm helping Dad to bed, my phone pings with a social media notification. I usually ignore these, but something catches my eye. It's Henry, on a yacht. I start scrolling, and my blood boils. There he is in Paris, skiing in Aspen, showing off his new sports car, all posted in the last few months. Big deal at work, my ass, I mutter under my breath. Everything okay, son? Dad asks, noticing my scowl. Yeah, Dad, just work stuff. Don't worry about it. But I can't let it go. The next day, during my lunch break, I call Henry. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You lied to me, I snap as soon as he answers. Whoa, what's your problem? He responds, unfazed. Cut the crap, Henry. I saw your posts. Paris, yachts, luxury cars. Meanwhile, I'm here, working my ass off, watching our parents deteriorate day by day. There's a pause, then a chuckle. Oh, that. Come on, Jack, you know how social media is. It's all for show. For show? Are you kidding me? I'm drowning here, Henry. I've asked for your help countless times, and you always have an excuse. Meanwhile, you're living it up like some big shot. Look, he says, his voice turning cold. I've worked hard for what I have. It's not my fault you chose to play the martyr. Martyr? They're our parents, Henry. And I'm sure they're very grateful, he says, his tone dripping with sarcasm. In fact, I bet that's why you're doing all this, isn't it? Trying to secure your place in the will. I'm stunned, speechless. How dare he? That's what I thought, he continues. Listen, I've got a real job to get back to. Some of us have actual responsibilities. The line goes dead. I stand there, phone in hand, shaking with rage. How did my brother become such a heartless bastard? Jack, your break ended 10 minutes ago. Joe calls from the back. I take a deep breath, trying to compose myself. Sorry, Joe. I'm coming. As I head back to work, I can't shake the anger, the hurt. But mostly, I feel a deep, gnawing disappointment. The brother I once looked up to is gone, replaced by someone I barely recognize. I'm left wondering how much more I can take before I break. Another year crawls by, and I watch helplessly as Mom and Dad slip away. Dad's the worst off, confined to his bed, his once strong voice now barely a whisper. Jack, he calls out one evening, his breath labored. We need to talk. I leaned in close, holding his frail hand. What is it, Dad? Your mother and I, we've made a decision about the house and our savings. My heart skips a beat. I've never cared about their money, but after everything. What do you mean? We're leaving it all to Henry, he says, eyes searching mine for understanding. The room spins. But Dad, I don't understand. We worry about Henry. Mom chimes in from her chair, her voice weak but firm. You've always been the responsible one, Jack. You'll be okay. But Henry, he needs this safety net. I want to scream, to tell them about Henry's lies, his lavish lifestyle. But looking at Dad's sunken face, the words die in my throat. I understand. I manage to choke out. Dad squeezes my hand weakly, smiling. You're a good son, Jack. Weeks later, Dad's gone. I throw myself into caring for Mom, pushing down the hurt and betrayal. But she fades fast, following Dad just months later. The day of Mom's funeral arrives, and I'm standing by her grave, emotionally and physically drained, when I hear a familiar voice. Well, if it isn't the prodigal son. I turn to see Henry, looking completely out of place in his designer suit. You actually showed up, I say, too tired to hide my bitterness. Had to make sure everything was in order, he replies, glancing around. Speaking of which, the house is a mess. Didn't you take care of anything while you were playing nurse? I clench my fists, anger rising. I was a little busy keeping our parents alive, Henry. He shrugs. Well, no need to worry about that anymore. I'm selling the place. I already have a few interested buyers. Selling? But Henry, that's our childhood home. It's all we have left of them. Correction, he says coldly. It's all I have left of them. Or did you forget about the will? The casual cruelty in his voice stuns me. So that's it. You're just going to erase everything. Our memories, our history. Oh, spare me the sentimental crap, Henry scoffs. It's just a house. And frankly, I could use the cash. My portfolio took a hit last quarter. I stare at him, this stranger wearing my brother's face. What happened to you, Henry? When did you become this? He straightens his tie, looking annoyed. I grew up, Jack. Maybe you should try it sometime. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to catch. I expect the house cleared out by the end of the month. As he turns to leave, I call out, desperation seeping into my voice. They loved you, you know. Right until the end, they worried about you. For a moment, he pauses. I think I see a flicker of something, regret, shame, but then it's gone, replaced by his usual smirk. Lucky me, he says, not bothering to look back as he walks away. I'm left standing there, surrounded by fresh graves and wilting flowers, feeling utterly lost. 3 years of my life, countless sacrifices, all for this. No job, no savings, and now, no home. As the reality of my situation sinks in, a mix of emotions I've never felt before hits me. A cocktail of grief, rage, and a burning desire for justice. Or maybe something darker. Revenge. One thing's for sure, I'm done being the good son. It's time Henry learns that actions have consequences. And I'll be damned if I let him walk away from this unscathed. So, there I am, mid-30s, no job, no home, crashing on my buddy Dave's couch. Every morning, I'm firing off job applications like my life depends on it. Because, well, it kind of does. Any luck? Dave asks one morning, finding me hunched over my laptop. Not yet, but I'm not giving up, I reply, hitting send on another application. Then, out of the blue, my phone rings. It's Sarah, an old colleague from my engineering days. Jack, I saw your application. We have an entry-level position at my startup. It's not much, but I'll take it, I interrupt, not even caring about the details. From day one, I throw myself into the work. Late nights, early mornings, whatever it takes. My experiences caring for mom and dad gave me a unique perspective on problem solving. And before I know it, I'm climbing the ranks. But then, one day, everything changes. I'm in a meeting when my phone starts blowing up with notifications. There's Henry's face plastered all over the news. Prominent businessmen involved in major fraud scheme, the headlines scream. Before I can process it, there's a knock at the office door. 2 stern-faced individuals in suits introduce themselves as federal agents. Mr. Johnson, we need to ask you some questions about your brother Henry. For a split second, I consider covering for him. He's still my brother after all. But then I remember everything. The lies, the neglect, the betrayal. What do you want to know? I ask, my voice steady. I tell them everything. Henry's neglect of our parents, his lies about his financial situation, his lavish spending while I struggled. It feels like a weight lifting off my chest. Weeks later, I watch on TV as Henry is led away in handcuffs, charged with multiple counts of fraud. His assets are frozen, his reputation in tatters. I hear through the grapevine that his wife's left him, taking the kids. Just when I think it's all over, I get a call from Mrs. Rodriguez, our old neighbor. Jack, your mother, she left something for you, a safety deposit box. She changed her will at the last minute. Inside the box, I find a letter and Mom's old locket, the one she always said was just worthless costume jewelry. My dear Jack, The letter reads, "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I know we hurt you by leaving everything to Henry, but I couldn't let you walk away empty-handed. This locket, it's been in our family for generations. It's worth more than you know. Use it wisely, and know that we always saw your sacrifice. We love you." Fast forward a few months, and I'm standing on a stage at a charity gala. My company's latest project, an ad-driven elderly care system, is being unveiled. This technology, I say into the microphone, is dedicated to every child who's ever cared for a parent, to every family struggling to provide dignity in their loved one's final years. As I scan the audience, my eyes land on a familiar face. Henry, out on bail, looking like he's aged a decade. Our eyes meet for a moment, but I don't linger. Instead, I turn back to the audience, to the future I'm building with integrity, innovation, and compassion. The applause washes over me as I step off the stage. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Henry, the betrayal, the struggles, they are all part of my past now. And me? I'm focused on the bright future ahead. Sometimes, justice has a way of serving itself. Now, I've got a question for you. If you were in Jack's shoes, would you have told the authorities everything about Henry's past behavior, or would you have protected your brother despite his betrayal? Think about it. Family loyalty versus doing what's right. Where do you draw the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
Hey there, I'm Melissa. Growing up in suburban Ohio with my twin brother Henry was a mix of chaos and camaraderie. Thankfully, we're not identical because, honestly, I don't think the world could handle two of him. We've always been close, sharing everything from our wildest secrets to our biggest dreams. One day, Henry burst into my room, waving an envelope excitedly. "Melissa, check this out." My heart raced as I snatched it from his hands. "No way, yours too." We tore open our college acceptance letters together, screaming with joy when we realized we'd both been accepted into Willow Creek University, a prestigious school known for its top-notch business program. "We did it, sis," Henry shouted, lifting me off the ground in a bear hug. "Put me down, you goof," I laughed, playfully swatting his arm. Our parents were over the moon. They had been saving for our college fund since we were in diapers. But Willow Creek was expensive, and their savings weren't quite enough to cover it all. "We'll make it work," Dad reassured us over dinner. "We can take out some loans, and you two can pitch in what you can." I nodded seriously. "I can pick up more shifts at the diner." Henry rolled his eyes. "Come on, Melissa, little. We've got our whole lives to work." That was classic Henry, always living in the moment while I was busy hustling at the diner. He was out with his friends, constantly dreaming up get-rich-quick schemes. "I'm telling you, Melissa," he'd say, lounging on my bed as I counted my tips. "One of these days, I'm going to come up with an idea that'll make us millionaires." "Sure, Henry," I'd reply, not even looking up, "and pigs will fly." Despite our differences, I was thrilled to start this new chapter with him. The night before we left for college, we stayed up late, reminiscing about old times. "Remember when we convinced Mrs. Johnson we were telepathic?" Henry laughed. I snorted. "Yeah, until you sneezed and blew our cover." "Hey, at least I didn't rat you out for putting glue in Bobby Taylor's hair gel," he retorted. "He deserved it," I shot back. "He was a jerk to you." Henry's smile softened. "You've always had my back, Melissa." "Someone's got to keep you out of trouble," I teased. The next morning was a whirlwind of last-minute packing and tearful goodbyes. Mom hugged us tightly, dabbing at her eyes. "Look out for each other," she said. Dad clapped us on the shoulders. "We're proud of you too. Make the most of this opportunity." As we drove away, watching our childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. Henry must have sensed it because he reached over and squeezed my hand. "We've got this, sis," he said confidently. "The Harrison twins are going to take Willow Creek by storm." Little did I know how true those words would turn out to be, just not in the way either of us expected. College life hit like a whirlwind. One minute, I was unpacking in my dorm, and the next, I was drowning in coursework. But something felt off with Henry. He'd always been the social butterfly, but this was different. "Hey bro, want to grab dinner?" I asked, poking my head into his room. Can't. Meeting Direct to discuss some ideas. I frowned. Direct again. He's got some killer business concepts, Melissa. You should hear them. I shrugged it off. Maybe this was Henry's way of coping with the college transition. Meanwhile, I was making my own connections. My roommate Jasmine was a riot. Girl, you need to loosen up, she'd say, dragging me to campus events. That's how I met Tyler from my econ class. Melissa, right? He asked, flashing a smile. Want to partner up for the project? Between study sessions with Tyler and late-night chats with Jasmine, I almost forgot about Henry's odd behavior. Almost. Then, one night, I overheard him on the phone. Yeah, Direct, I'm telling you, this is going to be huge. We just need more capital. Alarm bells rang in my head. The next day, I tried to talk to him. Henry, is everything okay? You've been acting weird. He brushed me off. Just stressed about midterms. Don't worry about it. But I did worry, especially when I logged into our joint tuition account to check the balance for next semester. My heart sank. Henry. I burst into his room, waving my phone. Where's half our tuition money? His face went pale. Melissa, I can explain. You better start talking, now. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Direct and we had this amazing business idea. A startup that could revolutionize campus food delivery. We just needed some initial investment. I felt sick. So you took our tuition money without even asking me. I snapped. It's not like that, Henry protested. It's an investment. We'll make it back tenfold, I swear. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you insane? That money isn't yours to gamble with. It's not gambling, he insisted. Derek's got connections. He knows what he's doing. Oh, and you know him so well after what, 2 months? I shot back. Henry's eyes flashed with anger. You don't understand business, Melissa. This is how fortunes are made. No, this is how idiots get scammed. We argued for hours, with Henry insisting it wasn't a big deal and that the returns would come in before the next tuition payment was due. But I couldn't shake the dread gnawing at my gut. The next day, I confided in Jasmine and Tyler. He did what? Jasmine exclaimed. Oh hell no, that's messed up. Tyler looked thoughtful. You know, I've heard some rumors about this Direct guy. Nothing concrete, but... What kind of rumors? I pressed. He shrugged. Just that he talks a big game, but no one's ever seen real results from his ventures. My mind raced. Was Henry being played, or was he in on some kind of scam? What are you going to do? Jasmine asked, concern in her voice. I took a deep breath. I don't know, but I'm going to find out what's really going on with this Direct character. And Henry, he's got some serious explaining to do. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. How had things gone so wrong so fast? Henry and I had always been a team, but now it felt like he'd chosen Direct over me, over our future. One thing was clear. I needed to get to the bottom of this fast before it was too late. The next day, I cornered Tyler after class, practically begging for his help. You're good with computers, right? Think you can dig up some dirt on Direct? Tyler's eyes lit up. Challenge accepted. Give me a day or two. Meanwhile, Jasmine was all in. My uncle works in financial crimes. I'll see what he can find out. We set up camp in my dorm room, papers, laptops, and energy drinks scattered everywhere. It was like a scene out of a crime show, minus the cool sound effects. Look at this, Tyler said, pointing at his screen. Direct's been involved in at least 3 failed startups in the last 2 years. Jasmine chimed in. And my uncle says there's a pattern of complaints about unpaid debts. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Fake business documents, empty promises, the works. Direct was a walking, talking scam machine. When I confronted Henry, he went full denial mode. You're just jealous, he snapped. Direct's a visionary. You don't understand his methods. Methods? I scoffed. Is that what we're calling fraud now? But as the evidence piled up, even Henry couldn't ignore it. The final straw was a recorded phone call Tyler managed to get, a clip of Direct bragging about how easy it was to scam dumb college kids. Henry's face crumbled as he listened. I can't believe it. How could I have been so stupid? I wanted to say I told you so, but the devastated look on his face stopped me. Instead, I just hugged him. We'll figure this out, I promised. But first, we need to stop Derek before he scams anyone else. We gathered all the evidence and took it to the campus police. Officer Martinez listened intently, her frown deepening with each new piece we presented. This is serious, she said. We'll need to involve the local PD as well. As we left the station, Henry turned to me, eyes full of regret. Melissa, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. Yeah, you should have, I agreed. But what's done is done. Now we need to focus on getting our money back. That night, we brainstormed with Tyler and Jasmine, trying to figure out a way to trap Derek and recover our funds. What if we set up a sting? Jasmine suggested. Pretend we got more money to invest. Tyler nodded enthusiastically. I could create some fake bank statements to make it look legit. It was risky, but what choice did we have? We coordinated with Officer Martinez, setting everything up for the next day. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with what ifs. What if Derek saw through our plan? What if we couldn't get the money back? The next morning, Henry and I met Derek at a crowded campus coffee shop. We were wired up, both with hidden mix and sheer nerves. As we sat down, Derek flashed his usual charming grin. So you got more to invest? He asked, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Henry nodded, sliding over the fake bank statements. Yeah, we managed to get a loan from our parents. We're all in. I watched Derek's eyes light up with greed, my stomach churning. Just as he reached for the documents, Officer Martinez, who had been waiting in the wings, stepped forward. Derek Carlson, you're under arrest for fraud and theft by deception. The look of utter shock on Derek's face was almost worth all the stress, almost. As the officers cuffed him and led him away, Henry turned to me looking lost. What now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, the weight of everything we'd been through pressing down on me. Now we pick up the pieces, and maybe learn to trust each other again. The days following Derek's arrest were a blur. We spent hours at the police station, giving statements and recounting every interaction we'd had with him. As it turned out, we weren't his only victims, not by a long shot. You two did good, Detective Johnson told us one afternoon. Thanks to your evidence, we've linked Derek to at least a dozen other scams across 3 states. It was a small comfort, but it didn't solve our immediate problem. We were still short on tuition, and the next payment deadline was looming. To my surprise, Henry stepped up. I'll get a job too if I have to. I'll make this right, Melissa. I wanted to believe him, but trust was hard to come by these days. Actions speak louder than words, and Henry knew that. True to his promise, he started working at the campus bookstore and picked up weekend shifts at a local restaurant. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies, spending late nights in the library. Tyler often joined me, and I found myself looking forward to his company. You're killing it in econ, he said one night, glancing at my latest test score. I guess all this drama hasn't hurt your GPA. It's given me something to focus on, I guess. Henry, on the other hand, was struggling. Between juggling work and trying to catch up on his classes, he looked perpetually exhausted. One day, he caught me in the hallway. Hey, want to grab coffee? Like old times? He asked, hopeful. Part of me wanted to say yes, to pretend everything was back to normal. But I couldn't. I've got a study group, I lied. Maybe another time. The hurt in his eyes was obvious, but I walked away. It wasn't that I didn't love him, he was still my twin. But the trust we'd once shared felt shattered, almost beyond repair. I had come to college expecting to conquer the world with Henry by my side, but now I felt more independent than ever, and more alone. Despite everything, I was still standing. I'd uncovered a fraud, helped bring a criminal to justice, and managed to keep my academic career on track. It wasn't the freshman year I'd imagined, but maybe it was the one I needed. We had a long way to go, but maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to being family again. For now, though, I had a future to focus on. My future, and for the first time in my life, it felt like enough.